Something it's a funny one now because when we talk about safe environment, safe space. When I heard
it's different. I get the space.
I heard this whole thing about safe space. Do you know what? I mean, I went to school. I went from a private school. I then went to a state school, and all of a sudden I learned about safe space. And my safe space was as long as my arm with a clenched fist. That was my safe space, and that's what you learn. And that's what you learn to protect.
Right.
And it's no different out there in the marketplace. So when we provide things like safe spaces for people who may be offended or maybe think we're not. What we're doing is we're making them victims, and this is the whole victim culture. Now, men can be victims as well. The reason why men aren't seen as victims is because, as a whole, many men don't actually accept the victimology, and they'll go and fight it, out. Because they have more testosterone, and Jordan Peterson has talked about this a lot in terms of they're just a bit more disagreeable, so they will stand their ground. Whereas a lot of women, and I'm not saying all women are fragile, but if you take this example from the Big Brother house, she's done a disservice to women who are real victims, who are in a vulnerable position, because the thing is now there's a mistrust in women because it's been highlighted so much. So you're gonna have the bad guys who are going to do things like that.
But you've always had charlatans. You've always had them in every crime.
Yes.
I don't see it necessarily as a gendered issue. You've got someone who is fraud is a crime where someone tries to say, so and so willingly signed over all of their assets to me. He knew what he was doing. Charlatans and users and manipulators have always existed. I don't necessarily see it as a gendered issue. I see it as a lack of integrity. And, for example, what is a gendered issue, in my opinion, is the way the sexes are treated differently by the media. I don't think people treat sexes differently. I think the media treats them and portrays them.
Excellent point. You see, I think this is just all a media artifact again. Just two things, but don't draw any assumptions until I finish the second point. If you see a couple of chimpanzees, a male chimpanzee and a female chimpanzee, and obviously the male is trying to seduce the female, and the female willingly goes along with it. And if the naturalist is filming this, and the female suddenly decides at the last moment she's not that keen, and the male persists because, of course, he's now gone to the point of no return, what will the naturalist say? He's not going to comment on it, is he? It's nature that men are the sexual hunters, and once you willingly put yourself in a certain position, then there are certain things which are likely to follow. And I think, going to the second point, as far as men and women are concerned, humans, most women are very sensible about this. In other words, they know what's expected at a certain point. They know what the outcome is going to be, and quite frankly, if some of them do change their minds, they're not going to say anything because they know that it's unreasonable, really, at the point. And the reason why it's unreasonable is because they willingly put themselves in a highly emotionally charged situation. And if we think about Daniel Kahneman's System 1 and System 2 way the brain functions, whereas one is our emotional brain, which is what drives most of our behavior most of the time. System 2 is our logic brain, which theoretically overrides System 1, but only if you prime it. And what the research shows, that you can only override System 1 if you're not in an emotional state at the time. So although most of our decisions are emotional, they're based on emotional triggering. Hang on one second. They're based on emotional triggering. Once you are in an emotional state, your System 2 is shut down. So once a man who is hunting, because that's what men do, they hunt, and they have their mate, and they're very close to mating, do you think that man is capable of any kind of rational thought? Of course not. And furthermore, the female knows it. And that's why most females are very reasonable. They want to be flirted with. They want to be made love to by the person that they choose. And if there's any mini misunderstandings, they do tend to brush it under the carpet. And it's only the minority of people who are problem people who are then blown up by the media. It's just, if you look at what the media cover, it's very it bears very little relationship to what's actually going on in the world, and studies have done this time and time again. There will be the occasional casualty, such as in Big Brother, where she knew that there would be a media storm, and she took it as a chance to raise her profile.
Right.
Yeah, and the thing is, I think what you were describing is in effect is the amygdala hijack, and that part of the brain, I believe, is also called the reptilian brain. Is that right?
Yes.
So we people will naturally go back to their natural state, which is quite hardwired into them.
Also, they did.
It's an honest question I have to ask you, because I think the theory I've heard about that is that after the front part of the brain developed, the frontal cortex, the cognitive part, that we can override that. I mean,
it is overridden.
I do think my personal experiences is I have had the cognition. I've never been in such a state, such an emotional state at any time, that I didn't have the cognition to listen and to respond. Not that, I mean, to be honest, it's never happened where someone has just gone, stop. Unless something's wrong.
Well, exactly.
And I have been able
this
to.
Is the rare. We're talking about the rare instances which are reported.
Yeah.
Let me give you an example of how powerful emotional conditioning is. They gave students some problems to solve, and one group of students, they asked them to hold a pen lengthwise in their mouths, and that simulates the physical act of smiling. The other group of students, they told them to put the pen to hold the pen like a cigarette in their mouths, which essentially gives them the same physical act as frowning.
Okay.
And the smiling group were able to solve the problems better.
Right.
Because their system 2 was freer to act.
Okay.
So that's incredibly important. And there was something else I wanted to say, but I can't remember because you
no, but sorry, it's a genuine question. I think it's very important to.
Yes, it is. I forgot. Yes, so I remembered. So they've also done research, and these are the statistics that actually more than 50%, in fact, something like 5 out of 7 women will sleep with someone under the influence of alcohol, and at least 2 out of 5 women cannot remember the name of the man that they slept with the next day.
Wow.
So there is a lot of issues going on here, and therefore you can see how a lady might find herself in a situation. In fact, we all know, if we use our common sense, how many of our female friends have said, yes, I was drinking when I slept with him. And because they are reasonable people, most of them, they will take responsibility themselves.
Yeah, but there's also I can't remember where I read it or where I heard it, but the thing is, a man can still be found guilty if she then accuses him of rape, if she's under the influence of alcohol, because he needed to show some judgment in terms of that. So regardless of whether he's too drunk as well, and he's gone down the same patterns, he's culpable because he hasn't taken accountability.
Yeah.
So but people are responsible for that in that respect. Do you not think? I mean, if a woman wants to go out and she wants to go and drink, she's also going to be able to.
If you're stone cold sober, and you see a woman who's quite clearly, wankered, then actually you are taking advantage of her. And unfortunately, I've seen people doing that.
I'm not disputing that as well.
Can I be honest? I've been very drunk with someone who's also very drunk, and still had the presence of mind not to want. I don't know. I wouldn't want to. It's not very nice.
It's not.
So my point is, like, you just get people who don't want to do that, and I think there is some cultural attribution to being a lad, to doing the deal, to at any cost. I think
that's right. But if you're both partying and you're both disinhibited, then you're both responsible. You can't report. You can't then start measuring blood alcohol levels and trying to figure out who was
exactly.
most complimented.
The thing is, different people have different levels of cognizance at different levels of blood alcohol levels. So it's about being responsible. Are you aware of what you're doing? I know that there's a limit past which, if I drink, I should just go home and go to bed. There's a
there's this whole. Actually, I totally forgot what I was going to say. Actually,
also not just alcohol. What about drugs? Drugs that can be far more
if you take drugs,
mind
absolutely.
Inhibiting to our cognition than alcohol.
Look, there'll always be men who will take advantage of a woman who's in a vulnerable state. And there's obviously Rohypnol and everything, the rape drug. There'll be men who'll do that, and because there's bad men. But the thing is, just because you change a lot of the social awareness of what's going around, will not stop them being bad. But you do get the good men who do have a good, strong moral compass. And if you actually sort of subdue them from their true nature, then the bad men are always going to win. It's just like nature. It's like the...
and the good women are going to lose out. As Catherine Deneuve said, we do want to be flirted with.
So, but I was not going to go down that road. I wasn't going to go down that road. I was talking about sometimes you need good men who are also prepared to be ruthless and take on these bad people as well. And as soon as you subdue good men who've got a high level of testosterone... I mean, let's take Winston Churchill, for example. All right? He was probably a charming psychopath in his own right. But the thing is, you needed someone like him to take Hitler on at the time because no one else could. All right, but
he was highly disagreeable.
He was, yes. but if you actually start making everybody so politically correct that let's negotiate, which is what's happening with the whole Brexit thing at the moment, and they can't organise a piss up in a brewery. What's happening is to take on these bullies. If you actually keep on making these good men less men in effect, who are there to take these bad men on because they're not going to change.
Must ascribe them to generic attributes that could be attributed to either sex, so more disagreeable in Jordan Peterson's case. In the olden days they'd say be a man, right? Man up. And also
men need to man up,
they do. Well,
and manning up doesn't actually mean treating women disrespectfully either.
What does it mean to you?
Man up, actually, I think it's being honourable.
Yeah.
I think it's actually being tenacious.
Okay.
I think it's being loyal.
Okay.
I think it's being respectful of others. But then again, that is
you missed out the main word. I'm sorry to break in, which is take responsibility.
That's what it means to me.
Because what's happening is with the metrosexuals and the women being pushed down the career pathways, what's happening is men are abrogating responsibility, and that's why they're becoming children. And there's nothing worse than an adult child.
Yes, this Xbox generation, where they are staying at home and living at home for longer. And I mean, economic conditions don't help, and the fact that they're graduating at a much lower rate than women are, and
who men are. That's because women are more they're more compliant in terms of falling into a system, whereas guys won't. But the thing is, men as a whole, and this is not just based on my opinion. This is based on data, proven data, that men overall will actually take larger risks than women. They will. They're more adventurous. They're more open. They're to those sort of things, whereas women actually conform a lot more, which is why they do better in school and in education. But why do men become CEOs? It's not because they're holding women back, I don't think.
No.
They are more aggressive, which is in the higher positions.
Well, they're freer to pursue that because they will
take the risks.
Who will look after
They will work the longer hours. They will be more tenacious.
I'm a single dad, so for half of the week. Right, and so I have quite a fulfilling life. The other half of the week, I'm free to pursue career goals, travel, have a life.
Relationships,
exactly.
Okay.
Which is an important topic. But if you have someone who's looking after your kids at home, then you're free to have a career. I think if you have kids raised by the nanny, both parents, and I see it a lot. Both parents are free to then pursue a career if they want to.
That's if
the child will be raised by the nanny.
But that's if you can afford it.
Yes, of course.
Don't forget, we live in an area which is quite an affluent area.
Yeah, but that Pandora's box is opened. It's not going to be closed. The minute that you in the olden days, and this is quite and it has quite a lot of economic impact. In the olden days, one parent, I won't say male or female, one parent worked out of the home, the other parent did all the childcare, which is of course untaxed work, all the domestic work, the childcare, etc.
The homemaker.
Yeah, it's all untaxed. The government cannot tax that.